Never the point in our house. Family was the point. Always family. We're Greek American, 3 generations deep in Metro Detroit. My parents live in Grosse Pointe in the same house they bought when they got married. Sunday dinners are mandatory, non-negotiable, and treated with the same seriousness as a board meeting. My mother Eleni makes spanakopita from scratch every single week, has done it since before I was born, and if you don't eat at least 2 pieces, she takes it personally. My uncle Theo lives 12 minutes away, and has never once in his life needed an invitation to show up at our door. We are loud, we are close, and we do not do things halfway. So when I tell you I met Megan at a fundraiser in Birmingham, and within 3 months I was completely gone over this woman, understand what that means coming from me. I don't fall fast. I don't fall easy. I had dated seriously twice before, and both times ended the same way. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way things end when 2 people realize they want different lives. Megan felt different from the first night. She walked into that fundraiser in a black dress that probably cost more than my first car, laughed at my Uncle Theo's terrible joke about Greek yogurt within 5 minutes of meeting him, and then turned to my mother and asked, genuinely asked, not politely asked, about the recipe for the appetizer she'd just eaten. My mother grabbed her arm and talked to her for 45 minutes. I stood there watching it happen and thought, oh, so this is how it happens. We dated for 14 months. She met my family early. By month 2, she was at Sunday dinner. By month 4, she knew which chair was Uncle Theo's, and never sat in it. My family absorbed her the way Greek families absorb people they like. Completely, immediately, and with a lot of food involved. I proposed on the rooftop of the Shinola Hotel in downtown Detroit on a Tuesday evening in late spring. Ring, flowers, the whole thing. She said yes before I finished asking. My mother cried when I called her. My father said, good. Now bring her to every Sunday dinner so your mother can feed her properly. Uncle Theo, somehow, already knew. To this day, I don't know how. I was happy, genuinely, completely happy, and I had absolutely no idea what she was planning. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get comfortable. This story is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Here's the thing about Megan that I want you to understand before anything else. She wasn't cold. She wasn't distant. She was warm and funny, and she made me feel consistently like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. So when the topic of her family came up, and it came up early, because in my world family comes up immediately, her answer didn't feel like a red flag. It felt like a wound. My parents and I don't have a relationship, she told me one night, about 6 weeks in. We were sitting on the couch in her apartment in Midtown, takeout containers on the coffee table, some show on in the background neither of us were watching. They were really toxic when I was growing up. Controlling, critical. My dad especially. I had to put serious distance between us just to function as an adult. I even changed my last name on social media to get some breathing room. I looked at her. She wasn't performing it. Her eyes were steady and a little tired, like someone recounting something they'd processed a long time ago but that still cost something to say out loud. I'm sorry, I said. Because what else do you say? It's okay. It's just not something I talk about a lot. They won't be at the wedding. I need you to be okay with that. I told her I was okay with that. And I was. Because I trusted her. Because she had given me zero reason not to. What I didn't fully account for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Megan. They weren't, not even close. But the Papadimitriou family operates on a specific cultural frequency, and that frequency includes a bone-deep need to know the people connected to the people they love. It's not nosiness. It's not judgment. It's just we believe you understand a person better when you understand where they came from, who raised them, what table they grew up sitting at. And by month 11 of our engagement, the silence around Megan's family had started creating its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in late July. My mother had made pasticcio, the real version, the one that takes most of Saturday to prepare, and we were all around the table in Grosse Pointe. Me, Megan, my parents, Uncle Theo, my cousin Nick Jr., and his wife. Everything was warm and normal, until Uncle Theo, operating as he always does with complete disregard for social timing, put down his fork and looked at Megan. Megan, sweetheart, I gotta ask you something. She smiled. Sure, Theo. Where are your people? The table went quiet the way tables go quiet when someone says the thing everyone has been carefully not saying. Megan's smile stayed in place, but her eyes shifted. Just slightly. My parents and I aren't in contact. I've mentioned that. I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it. Theo wasn't being cruel. He was being Theo. Because in our family, and I mean this with love, you don't marry into a family you've never met. It's not how we do things. Theo, my father's voice. Low single word. Theo picked up his fork, but the question was already on the table and no amount of pasticcio was going to bury it. Later, after Megan had gone home, my father came and found me in the kitchen. He poured himself a small glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "She's a good woman," he said. "Not a question. She is. I believe you." He nodded slowly. "But Nico, we're going to stand in a church. We're going to make promises in front of God and everyone we know. And we're going to do that without knowing a single person from her side. Her parents are toxic, Pop. She had a hard, I hear you. I believe her." He set the glass down. "But toxic people still exist somewhere. They have an address." He looked at me steadily. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into." I didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder once and went back to the dining room. I stood there in my parents' kitchen for a long time after that. But here's what I need you to understand. I still wasn't suspicious. Not really. Not of Megan. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the one thought I couldn't shake, the one that kept surfacing on the drive home to Midtown, was this. What if her parents take one look at me and decide I'm not what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds coming from a guy with a successful business and a family like mine. But Megan existed in a very specific world. Corporate marketing, downtown Detroit, the kind of social circle where everyone has an MBA and an opinion about wine regions. Her apartment was decorated like a magazine. Her friends wore brands I had to look up. She carried herself with a particular kind of polish that I found attractive, but also occasionally, quietly, made me feel like I was slightly too much, too loud, too Greek, too Theo adjacent. What if her parents were the same way? What if they had money, standards, expectations I didn't know about? What if they met me and Megan saw the whole thing through their eyes? And something shifted. That was my actual fear, driving north on I-75 the following Saturday morning in August. Not that I'd uncover a lie. Not that anything was wrong. I thought I was going to meet intimidating people who might not think I was good enough. I was going to introduce myself, take whatever they gave me, and try to make a case for myself as the man their daughter had chosen. I genuinely thought I was the underdog in this story. Finding her parents hadn't actually required a private investigator, just a routine piece of administrative boredom. By month 11 of our engagement, Megan had moved into a high-rise condo downtown that my firm owns and manages. Because we were getting married in a few weeks, our legal team needed her to formally sign onto the master corporate lease for tax purposes. I was at my desk on a Friday afternoon when my office manager dropped the processed paperwork on my desk. I glanced down at the state-issued ID she had uploaded to the portal. Megan Melissa Bennett. Not Ashford, the name she used on social media and introduced to my friends. Bennett. Out of pure idle curiosity, I ran a quick property search on the name. A few clicks led to an old public record, a dormant Facebook profile she hadn't touched since college, and a primary address on Maple Avenue in Saginaw, Michigan. About an hour and 40 minutes north on I-75. I told Megan I had a property walkthrough. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The drive up was mostly me rehearsing introductions in my head, and quietly dreading the moment someone opened the door and looked at me like I wasn't what they had in mind. I got off the highway into Saginaw just before 10 in the morning. Followed the GPS into a neighborhood of modest ranch homes. Clean streets, American flags, the kind of block where people know their neighbors' names and wave from the driveway. I slowed down. Wait. I found the house. A well-kept ranch home, with a flower bed along the front walk and wind chimes on the porch. And in the front yard, moving slowly with a garden hose, was an older man in a Detroit Tigers t-shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering the flower bed with the unhurried patience of someone who had nowhere more important to be. This is not what I pictured. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes recalibrating everything. There was no gate, no luxury car in the driveway, no indication whatsoever that the people inside this house had ever spent a single moment worrying about whether someone else was good enough for anything. These are not intimidating people. These are regular people. And for one brief, uncomplicated moment, I felt genuinely relieved. I got out of the car, walked up the driveway. He noticed me when I was about 10 feet away and squinted in that cautious way people do when a stranger walks toward them. "Help you with something?" I stopped. took a breath. Sir, you don't know me. My name is Nico Papadimitriou. I'm engaged to your daughter, Megan. Gerald Bennett dropped the hose. Not fumbled it. Dropped it. Water pooled slowly across the driveway as he stared at me, and his face did something I was completely unprepared for. It crumbled, not with anger, not with suspicion, with relief, with 2 years of accumulated grief finding somewhere to finally land. Nancy, his voice broke on her name. Nancy, come outside. And in that single moment, standing on a driveway in Saginaw watching a retired postal worker try to collect himself, my entire understanding of the situation turned completely upside down. Inside the Bennett house, everything I thought I knew about Megan began coming apart at the seams. Quietly, methodically, over coffee I didn't ask for, and a plate of cookies Nancy put out with shaking hands. The house was clean and modest and filled, completely filled, with Megan. School photos, birthday pictures, a prom photo on the mantel, a college graduation portrait where Gerald and Nancy stood on either side of her, beaming. Gerald's arm around her shoulders, Nancy's face so proud it almost hurt to look at. These were not the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. The story came out carefully. Gerald was a retired postal worker, 31 years. Nancy had been a school secretary in the Saginaw district for most of Megan's childhood. They had put her through the University of Michigan, full ride, no parent debt. They were proud of that, deeply proud. When Megan moved to Detroit and started building her corporate life, things changed slowly. Calls got shorter. Visits stopped. She started appearing in photos online under a different last name. Ashford, her middle name. At events with people Gerald and Nancy didn't recognize, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the wedding conversation. The $100,000 ask. Gerald's heartbroken counteroffer of $15,000. Everything they could give without destroying their retirement. Megan's response. If you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it. Blocked that same night, Nancy slid something across the table. A birthday card, sealed, unopened, stamped return to sender in red. Megan's handwriting on the return address label. Our address. I stared at the red stamp on the envelope, then slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the text message Megan had sent me late the previous evening. The one I had read right before falling asleep. The one that had prompted me to make this drive in the first place. Babe. Great news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything, and they want to meet you for lunch tomorrow before they head out on a trip. I'm so excited for you to finally meet them. The kitchen was very quiet. I looked up slowly. Gerald and Nancy Bennett were sitting directly across from me, completely oblivious to the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Nancy read it. She set the phone down gently, said nothing. Gerald looked out the kitchen window at the flower bed he'd been watering when I walked up. I thought about the drive up, my rehearsed introductions, my quiet fear that I wouldn't be good enough for these people. I almost laughed. I almost actually laughed. Because I had spent weeks worrying that Megan's parents might look down on me, that they might be too polished, too wealthy, too particular. And they were here, in Saginaw, in a ranch house on Maple Avenue. With wind chimes and a garden hose and 2 years of unopened birthday cards, the person who had decided someone wasn't good enough wasn't them. It was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who drove up I-75 nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man who drove back to Detroit that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is that the great one never breaks character. Not even at the dinner table. Not even when everything is falling apart. I didn't confront her that night. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I pulled back into our parking garage in Midtown Detroit at a little past 2 in the afternoon, sat in my car for 10 full minutes, and made a very deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was afraid. Not because I doubted what I'd just seen and heard in that kitchen in Saginaw. But because I am my father's son, and my father taught me something about the moment right before a confrontation that most people get wrong. He said, Nico, the man who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a confession. I rode the elevator up to our apartment floor and stood outside the door for a moment. I could hear Megan inside, moving around, the low sound of a TV, completely unbothered, completely unaware. I put my key in the door, walked in. She was on the couch with a glass of white wine, and her laptop opened to a venue website. She looked up and smiled the way she always smiled. Warm, easy, like I was the best part of her day. How was the walkthrough? Promising, I said. Long drive, though. You look tired. You want me to order something? I want you to explain to me why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Saginaw with our return address stamped on it in red. That's what I want. Sure, I said. Whatever you're in the mood for. I sat down next to her. She leaned her head briefly on my shoulder and went back to looking at venue photos. I looked at the screen without seeing any of it. On the outside, completely normal. On the inside, I was completely dismantling everything. That night, I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through a complicated deal. I separated what I knew from what I assumed, and I built a timeline. What I knew, Megan's real last name was Bennett. Her parents were Gerald and Nancy Bennett of Saginaw, Michigan, alive, present, and heartbroken. They had not abused her. They had not been controlling or toxic in any way that Gerald, Nancy, or a single photograph in that house suggested. They had offered her $15,000 toward a wedding, been told that wasn't enough, and been erased the same night. What I knew, Megan had sent me a text while I was sitting in her parents' kitchen, telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch, which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie, which meant there was a next floor, which meant there was someone she planned to bring to that lunch. Who? That was the question I fell asleep trying to answer. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next 3 days I paid attention differently. Not suspiciously. I was careful about that. I didn't go through her phone. I didn't follow her. I just listened. The way you listen when you finally understand that every conversation has been happening on 2 levels simultaneously, and you've only been hearing one of them. I noticed that she mentioned her boss, a man named Robert Callahan, more than she ever had before. Casually, Robert thinks the Henderson account is going to close early, or in passing. Vivian Callahan was at that same fundraiser, apparently. Small mentions, nothing alarming. The kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they're trying to make someone feel familiar with a name before that name becomes important. She was warming me up to them. She'd been doing it for weeks, and I'd never noticed. Robert Callahan. I looked him up from my office the following Tuesday morning with the door closed. Senior Vice President at Megan's firm, a wealth management company headquartered in downtown Detroit. His photo on the company website showed a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, the kind of effortlessly confident that comes from decades of never having to justify himself in a room. His wife Vivian appeared in a society column from a Detroit charitable gala from 2 years prior. Polished, highlighted hair, the whole picture. A wealthy, well-regarded couple. Exactly the kind of people you'd want standing beside you if you were trying to convince a traditional Greek-American family that you came from somewhere impressive. There they are. I sat back in my chair and stared at the corporate headshots of the Callahans. I realized then that Megan wasn't just a con artist. She was trapped in a prison of her own immense insecurity. She had spent a decade reinventing herself in Detroit, tailoring her identity to climb a social ladder that my family didn't care about, but her corporate friends did. When her father refused to destroy his retirement for a single day of theater, it wasn't just a financial disagreement to her. In her mind, their modesty was a threat to the polished, wealthy illusion she had sacrificed everything to build. To keep the lie alive, she didn't just walk away from them. She had to erase them completely. And then I thought about what she must have told the Callahans to get them to agree to this. Because here's what I know about people like Robert and Vivian Callahan. They didn't get where they are by being stupid or careless. For Megan to get them to sit across a lunch table and introduce themselves as her parents, she had to have given them something that made sense. A story that held together, something sympathetic enough that 2 busy prominent people would say yes without asking too many questions. What did she tell them? I turned it over for 2 days, and then on Thursday morning my phone buzzed with a reminder Megan had added to our shared calendar. Lunch, Robert and Vivian, the Lark, West Bloomfield, Saturday 12:30 noon. She'd added a note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, babe. This means everything to me. I stared at that note for a long time. It means everything to me. I thought about Nancy Bennett pressing a sealed birthday card across a kitchen table. I thought about Gerald Bennett's face when he read that text message over my shoulder. Yeah, I'll bet it does. I called my father that same Thursday from my car, engine running, sitting in the parking structure beneath our building. He picked up on the second ring. I need to talk to you. Come to the house. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table in Grosse Pointe, the same table where Megan had charmed my mother, where Uncle Theo had asked his question, where everything had looked completely normal 2 weeks ago. And I laid it out. Everything. Saginaw, Gerald and Nancy, the birthday card, the text, Robert and Vivian Callahan. My father sat across from me with his hands folded on the table and listened without a single interruption. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" 4 words. That's it. No lecture. No. I told you so. No dramatic reaction. I need to go to this lunch, I said. I need to build something bigger. My father nodded slowly. And the Bennetts? I'm going back to Saginaw after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next. He looked at me steadily. And what comes next? A dinner, I said. A real one, with the right people in the room. Another pause. Then my father stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, "I'll talk to your mother about the restaurant." That was the whole conversation. My mother's reaction was slightly less contained. She came into the kitchen from the living room where she'd apparently been listening to the entire thing, which in our house is not eavesdropping, it's just being present, and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that I can only describe as the specific fury of a Greek mother who has fed someone spanakopita in her home and been lied to. She sat at my table, my mother said. "Ma, she ate my food, Nico, in my house. And her mother is up in Saginaw with a birthday card that came back unopened. I know. Those poor people. I know, Ma." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she walked over and put both hands on my face, the move she's been making since I was 4 years old, and she wanted my full attention. "You fix this," she said quietly. "Not just for you, for them." Saturday came. The Lark in West Bloomfield. Old money restaurant. The kind of place where the lighting is specifically designed to make everyone look slightly more important than they are. Megan had made the reservation, naturally. I got there 5 minutes early and took a seat facing the door. They arrived together, Megan in the middle, one hand looped through Robert Callahan's arm, Vivian on his other side. Megan was glowing. Robert moved with the easy confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Vivian was all gracious smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile. Firm handshake. "Nico," Megan said, her voice warm with a particular kind of triumph. "This is my dad, Robert, and my mom, Vivian." Robert. Vivian. Not Gerald. Not Nancy. Robert. Vivian. I shook both hands. "I've heard so much about you. Both of you." I had heard nothing about them because they did not exist in this role until approximately a week ago. We sat. Menus opened. And for the next 20 minutes I watched Megan perform with a fluency that under any other circumstances I would have found genuinely impressive. She laughed at Robert's observations a half-beat too quickly. She referenced shared memories with Vivian, mentions of trips, restaurants, family moments, and Vivian tracked along carefully, the way someone does when they're working from a script they only half memorized. Robert was smoother. He asked me questions about the business, made appropriate comments about Detroit's commercial real estate market, and generally acted like a man who had done his research and was determined to be convincing. They were all performing. The whole table was a stage, and I sat there eating pan-seared whitefish, being absolutely, perfectly charming. "So, Robert," I said, setting my fork down with the relaxed ease of a man with no concerns whatsoever. "Megan's told me a lot about you. You've clearly been a huge presence in her life." Robert smiled. "She's been like family to us. Like family. There it is." "That means everything," I said. I looked at Megan when I said it. She beamed back at me. "Keep smiling, sweetheart." "I'll be honest with you both," I continued, leaning forward slightly, the way I do in negotiations when I want someone to feel like I'm letting them in on something. "My family is traditional. Greek on my father's side. We take the formal stuff seriously. My parents would never forgive me if we didn't do this properly." I paused. "We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing overwhelming. Family, a good meal, a toast. My parents just need to welcome the people who matter to Megan before we get to the altar." Robert glanced at Vivian, a half-second of silent calculation. Then, "We'd be honored." Megan grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. "Perfect," I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back, the full, radiant, triumphant smile of a woman who believes she has just won. The trap was already built. She just walked into it smiling. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. The following 6 days, I moved quietly and precisely. Monday, I went back to Saginaw. I called Gerald from the driveway before I knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking. We sat in the same kitchen, same coffee, same table. I told them about the lunch, Robert and Vivian Callahan, the performance, the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. Nancy's hands went still around her mug. Nico, we don't want to make a scene. Nancy. I looked at her directly. My mother is going to stand at a church and welcome whoever walks through those doors into our family. She deserves to know who that actually is. I paused. And you have spent 2 years sending birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room. Not for drama. Just because you're her parents. And somebody needs to say that out loud. Gerald reached over and covered Nancy's hand with his. He looked at me. What time should we be there? Tuesday, I sat with my father and Uncle Theo in my father's home office in Grosse Pointe and briefed them fully. My father listened, asked 2 precise questions, and then said, I'll handle the restaurant. He picked up his phone and that was that. Uncle Theo's response required immediate containment. I want to say something to her at the door, he grumbled, narrowing his eyes. No, Theo, you say absolutely nothing, I told him, putting both hands on his shoulders. I need you to do something that is going to be the hardest thing you have ever done. Not one word until I stand up to make the toast. He looked at the ceiling, then at my father, chewing on the inside of his cheek. Fine, Theo finally hissed. But I want a double portion of tirapita before anyone else sits down, and I'm holding the door when we walk out. I looked at him and nodded. That I can absolutely guarantee you. Every piece was in place. Pegasus Taverna in downtown Detroit, my father's choice, and the right one, a restaurant that felt like someone's home, not a stage set. The private dining room in the back, white linen, candles, warm lighting. My mother had handled the menu personally and added a small framed photo of my grandparents to the welcome table because she said they should be there. Gerald and Nancy Bennett were driving down from Saginaw Saturday morning, checking into a hotel in Dearborn. Gerald had called me Thursday night to confirm. His voice was steady, careful, and at the end of the call, after we'd gone over the details, he said quietly, Nico, whatever happens in that room tomorrow, thank you for going to Saginaw, for knocking on that door. A pause. She picked a good one, even if she doesn't know it yet. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just said, I'll see you tomorrow, Gerald. I pressed my suit Friday night, got into bed next to Megan, who was already asleep, already dreaming about whatever version of tomorrow she had constructed in her head. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about a man in a Detroit Tigers t-shirt watering a flower bed on Maple Avenue. A sealed birthday card with a red stamp across the front. A kitchen table where 2 people had been quietly waiting for 2 years for someone to finally show up. Someone had shown up. Tomorrow, so would they. You can build a lie as tall as you want, but the moment the right people walk through the door, the whole thing comes down. I woke up that Saturday morning in September, with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace. It comes from certainty. I lay there for a few minutes listening to Megan in the bathroom. The sound of the shower, the hairdryer, the particular rhythm of a woman preparing for a performance she believes she has already won. And I thought about Gerald Bennett pressing his navy blazer in a Dearborn hotel room. Nancy standing at a mirror trying to hold herself together. 2 people who drove an hour and 40 minutes down I-75 for a dinner their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited to. Get up, Nico. Let's go finish this. Megan spent 3 hours getting ready. 3 hours. I sat in the living room watching football highlights with the volume low, and I let her have every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion. Once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I said she looked beautiful, because she did. That was never the issue. The issue was everything underneath the beautiful. She wanted to leave early to check on the setup. I told her to go ahead, that I had a quick call to make and I'd meet her there. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door looking like everything in her life was exactly on track. The moment the door closed, I picked up my phone and called Gerald. He answered on the first ring. You good? I asked. We're ready. His voice was quiet, solid, the voice of a man who had decided something. Nancy's dressed. We're ready. Okay, when I text you, you walk in. Doesn't matter what's happening at the table. You just walk in and you stand there. You don't have to say a word. A pause. Gerald. Yeah, she's going to see you the second that door opens.